All right.
And we're good?
We're live.
All right. So welcome to another episode of Routine Traffic. And if I sat here and I was to put into words how excited I am, there would not be enough words to say in regards to my special guest today. And when I say special, I mean somebody who is doing an amazing job in the world of TikTok in regards to education. And this is Gregory Carr, and he is the founder, creator of Shade Tree Cardiology. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I dig it.
This is really, really awesome. And so kind of give you an understanding of how I met you, how I first brought to you the idea of doing a podcast, is we were at the EMS Expo, and a day before, a friend of mine, his name's Josh Reese. He'll be watching this. He's a big time follower of you.
Awesome.
And he said, "Dude, the guy from Shade Tree Cardiology is here." And I was like, "No way. What's he doing here?" And he was like, "I don't know, but he's here, and you need to do a podcast with him because he is awesome." And so I was like, "Well, if I run into him, because it's a big place." And then the next day, I ran into you in the elevator.
Yep, that's right.
And you were walking to a class, and I was like, "Shade Tree Cardiology." And he said, "Yes, I am." And I was like, "Dude, man, it is great to meet you. I've listened to your TikToks. You bring so much information to the world of emergency services and medical. I love what you're doing. Would you be interested in doing a podcast?" And you were like, "Absolutely, absolutely." So again, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate that. And just because I feel like it would be fun for everyone to know, that is definitely the most surreal couple of days in my life to date. I had no idea this had gotten as out of hand as it has. I started that in 2016 as a very frustrated professor because, and we were talking offline earlier, I paid cash for my paramedic program. The GI Bill did not cover that, so I didn't get any GI Bill funding until I went for the degree end of it. And of course they fixed that now for trade schools, but at the time it didn't cover it. So it sort of came as this brainchild, like you shouldn't have to pay to graduate paramedic school. And, those ACLS simulators and all that. So that's 2016. You fast forward a couple of years, and we'll probably get into how this happened, because I got famous completely by accident. And I had no idea it was what it was. I was at the conference to sort of meet people, hang out, with educators. If you're the smartest person in the room, you find another room, right? I was guaranteed to find somebody smarter than me at the conference, and that's going to help me grow. And I went to that very first lecture with the guy. I never watched the show Night Watch, but it was a big deal.
Oh yeah.
And it was I forget his name, the chief. Really nice guy. I got a chance to hang out with him later, and saw his lecture, and it was fantastic. At the end of it, this guy walks up to me. I forget his name. I know his screen name, and he says, "Hey, can I take a picture with you?" And it was, "Am I who you think I am?" And he takes a picture, and people see it, and it's like a dam breaking. People start coming up to me, and I thought, "Oh no," I'm actually a really heavily introverted person. I'm a forced ambivert. The military made that happen. I had no idea it was what it was. So that day and a half was very surreal for me. But on the way home, digesting it, it made me really happy, because it meant that our field is collectively, I think we're shifting from the mentality of you don't need to know that to tell me more. And that just, had me grinning ear to ear the whole way home, because it was like watching our service grow in real time. And it made me happy. It was all I ever wanted out of this.
That's so true. And I want to kind of sling on that here in just a little bit. But before we get to that point, I want to ask you, you graduated high school. After you graduated high school, did you know that you were going to be did you have an idea you want to be in emergency service?
Man, I didn't have an idea about anything in those days. I didn't have a clue what I was going to do or how I was going to do it. I knew I didn't want to go to college. That I knew.
Yeah.
Funny. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I decided to work. I come from, what I feel like are very honorable, hardworking people. and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to do that. After I don't know 6 months, I got a job. My uncle Neil, who is passing on, God rest his soul. He got my first real job for me. Got him to give this 18-year-old kid a chance, and we filled high pressure gases. And I was a pretty adept kid. I asked a lot of questions. Why? Matter, I got in trouble for it a lot, actually. My dad even told me you think too much. It's which is true. I'm not disagreeing with him. And we filled government contracts. We got this massive order one day in 2003. And I said, we're going to war, boys. I'd been watching the news about the UN inspectors and everything with Iraq and Saddam Hussein. And it was just the biggest military order I had ever seen. You got to understand, Afghanistan's going on the whole time. We've been doing big military orders, but nothing like this. This was a guaranteed, 2 weeks after that, we go to war. 2 weeks after that, I go through the process of signing up for the military, and that in itself is its whole story. But I settle on the reserves because I want to go to war and come back. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I had no desire to go to Korea or anything like that, and for reasons I still don't know, I wanted to be a combat medic. There might have been a mix of adventure seeking. These days, I think that human beings are born with an operating system, and it gets kind of cloudy and convoluted with more experiences. But when we're younger, we're able to sort of hear what it's telling us, and just something in me knew I wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. And so through happenstance and it was serendipitous, I was very lucky to discover my calling, for lack of a better word, at 18. That's
nice.
How that came about. I don't have a great story. It just happened.
Well, that's nice, because a lot of times, I remember when I was 18, I didn't have a clue about what I wanted to do. And so if you can have that moment in life where you realize what it is you want to do, that's awesome.
It's a good feeling to have at least a handful of things in life where you can look at it and say, if I had it to do all over again, I would try to figure out a way to do it the exact same way. Mm-hmm. And I'm like everybody else. I got a ton of things I do different, but that's right in there with like marrying my wife. And when we had my daughter, I would want everything exactly the same. If I changed anything in life, if it came at the cost of that, I wouldn't want to change it. Yeah. I wouldn't want to change what I do for a living, for sure. Yeah. They pay me to make sick people feel better. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like hitting the lottery every day. It really is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so you decided. So what happened? Where did you go at 18?
Okay. So after the initial fallout at home, my mom wouldn't speak to me for 3 days. My mom was very, very overprotective, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Mm-hmm. I was the oldest, probably a little bit of a hellraiser, not in a terrible sense. But I was just very curious, which sort of translated to mischievous, So I was always the one after the adventure, going to go do the things. So I wanted to ship out really quick. And I told the guy that. So going through this process, I had to take the ASVAB. I mean, I had no idea how any of this worked. I just decided I was going to do it. And when I do that, I just do it. I don't care what the obstacles are. If the goal's important enough, the obstacles are almost irrelevant. They're just things you have to mitigate to get where you're going, right? That's all of life, whether you're joining the military or building a hot air balloon. It doesn't matter. So I went to Fort Jackson, Alpha 134, did boot camp there, went through Foxtrot 232 in Fort Sam Houston, Class 13, 2003. And I did well. It was the first time in my life I made good grades and was doing something I enjoyed. My family was flabbergasted. They all thought I was crazy. I barely made it out of high school. Mm-hmm. But most of that was, if you gave me homework, it was just understood I wasn't going to do it. Sure. I'll take the whooping. It's fine. It was, I didn't care. So I came out close to the top of that class. So it was a feeling of success. It was a feeling of overcoming stuff. It was very addictive. 53% of our class failed out, and the Army, that was normal attrition rates. The Army chose their job for them, and I knew I didn't want that. And I really enjoyed what I was learning, so I had good encouragement there. I kept learning it. So kind of fast forward a little bit, I volunteered to go to Iraq the first time. My unit has already mobilized without me. So I asked them, can I go ahead and mobilize and go? They said, no, you got all this stuff you have to do. You have to qualify. You got to set up claymores and throw grenades. I said, hey, I just did all this. I went through boot camp. They said, well, you know what? You have a point. So they cut me some orders and they sent me to Fort Bragg. And, February, I think 22nd, 2004, I hit boots on ground in Kirkush Military Training Base. It was later called Camp Caldwell. Very quickly, though, and even in training, those guys noticed that I was adept with it. Like it was sort of a see one, do one, teach one. If you could show it to me, I could learn it. Mm-hmm. But that my interest in it just never seemed to end. I would keep these guys up all night with questions, and they'd say, read this book. This will keep you busy for a while. And 3 days later, I'd say, do you have anything else like this? You read that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. The Merc Manual. Yeah. Where can I get a copy? You know what I mean? And I couldn't get enough. Yeah. I loved it, and it just was this cycle. And I started, I'm learning how to read blood work. I had mentors. Nobody's as lucky as I am. Mm-hmm. I'll go ahead and tell you that. I had Dr. Warren Singleton was probably one of the biggest influences on my life. Not so much that he was guiding me during this deployment, but he was who I wanted to be when I grew up. He was a little older than me. He was really cool. He was really smart. He was known for that, but he was also humble about it. Mm-hmm. In those days, he was just Sergeant Singleton. He hadn't went to medical school or anything, but he took a lot of time with me, and so many people just like him. My battalion surgeon, Dr. John Dubose, Jim McCann. I could give you a litany of names of people who just invested in me. So coming out of the end of that deployment, I was 20, and I knew so much about the patient population that we served. And I got really heavily into infectious disease and then like musculoskeletal injuries that you would see in daily life. This is probably where I fell in love with clinical medicine, was in 2004, because you think of Iraq and you think traumatic injuries, and they have those, to be sure. But, at any given point, about 1% of your battalion's injured, right? And about 7 or 8% is sick. So, what killed more soldiers in the wars of the old days, right? It was dysentery and things. So, learning about that, it started this process, this snowball that I've yet to see slow down 20 years later. So that kind of is how it all got started. I had great mentors that would show me where to buy the books. They would help me understand the text. You have to understand, I had no college. I barely had a high school education because I didn't pay attention.
Why do you think that is? Because you're right. I was the same way. I did not want to be in high school. I did not want to be in school. If it wasn't for sports, I probably would have just left a long time ago.
Yeah, I get it.
But it's something about that higher education or after 18, after that age, where you're like, this is kind of important. I mean, I really enjoy this.
I think it's because when you go to school, public school, private school, doesn't matter. When you go to school, you have to be there. And now, as a child, you want to go play, you want to go explore. And to quote Neil deGrasse Tyson, every kid's born a scientist, and then we beat it out of them.
Oh, good.
So I'm asking questions in school that they don't want to answer, and it makes teachers uncomfortable when children are thinking at a level that's beyond the scope of their lesson or what. Especially public school teachers who, and this is not like a denigration of the public school teaching system. I have friends that teach, but there are some. Just like there's some people in our field that they're kind of phoning it in, right? They're counting down days. And, I had some of those in subjects where I was interested. And so I would get kind of shot down a lot for saying I want to do this or want to do that. But then now, there again, I also had fantastic teachers. I'll call her by name, Susan Stone Hawkins, who would lend me books from her personal stash because she knew that I was beyond this in a literary fashion. She would hand me To Kill a Mockingbird, which is part of our curriculum, and I'd have to put down Moby Dick to read that. So she saw this and nurtured it. So I had equal parts. But when you put all that together, and then you have mathematics without context, right? I did horribly in algebra. I did great in physics. Why? Well, physics is math with a reason. So everything's out of context. It's not with a reason. I mean, Trigonometry. Everybody struggles with trig, right? I barely could do trigonometry in high school. So, I mean, and when I say barely, I mean I was happy to have a 70 because I'm trying to figure out the length of the flagpole based on the shadow. Now, fast forward a couple years, I'm holding a 7.62 rifle, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to shoot 330 meters at a downward angle of 30 meters, I need to calculate for 300 meters because that's the actual bullet travel. Now, there's trigonometry with a reason.
Yeah, buddy.
Now I can do trig. Right? There's no mental block there anymore. So if you amplify that times a million, that was what medical education was to me, because it's stuff with it's chemistry with a reason. It's math with a reason. It's levels of English I had never had to learn. Now I need to know because I can't read a research paper and understand it yet. So it made prerequisites fun when I finally went to college, because I'm in English 113 having a ball because now I understand how this structure is done in this paper from the APA or that paper, and same with the mathematics and chemistry and so on. So I think a lot of the reason people dislike public school or public education, the education that we're made to go through. I don't want it to sound like I'm harping on public school, but the education we have to go through, K through 12.
Yeah.
It's out of context in a lot of ways, and we don't yet have a purpose for it mentally. And people are only going to work so hard on things that are not important to them. Now, you plug that into the fact that I am hideously ADD, and it's physically painful for me to pay attention to things I don't care about. You know what I mean? And then, put that together with hormones and little girls running around, and you're socially awkward and you daydream, and it just snowball effect,
And so you got your medic in the service?
No, sir. No. That's
okay. So you wanted to be a medic. You wanted to be military medic.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then when did you get out of the service? Or are you still in the service?
No, sir. No, I got out 2011. So I did 8 years on a 6-year contract. That's we call that Uncle Sam math. Stop loss. What they call a medic, and it is what it is, right? I wasn't mad till they turned off stop loss pay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah. So whenever you're a medic in the military, you have this huge scope of practice on a very narrow patient base.
This is true.
Right. So while I could interpret your labs and decide if your creatine kinase had come down enough for me to drop your hourly fluid intake post electrical burn, say, to 100 mLs an hour because your creatinine looked good, and I could crank out a Cockcroft-Galt GFR on a napkin, I couldn't look at a flat line and tell you that was called a systole. Wasn't something we did. I didn't know anything about diabetes or neonatology, endocrinology. We don't do that. Everybody's 25 and healthy.
True.
So I was what you would call a medic in the military, but I had to become a paramedic afterward. I had to go back to school from day one. And I want to say this publicly for the world to hear. I appreciate the faith that people have in military medics. That said, they still need to go to school for civilian medicine from day one. You need to review concepts that you have never used. You need to learn things from a vantage point which you never had. I learned so much in paramedic school, it was amazing. The way I became the cardiology guy was being scared to death of cardiology. I struggled with cardiology because, the basics I was in class with, they were at least working 911. I was working on a farm. You know what I mean? Fresh out of the service. I had no context. I had no tutelage. I had no FTO I could go to. I had friends I could call, but now this is in 2010, 2011. 2011. So there wasn't video chat or a lot of Zoom and all. It wasn't like common parlance. It wasn't happening all the time. So there was no visual aids. Everything I had to learn from there. And that weighed in heavily. I knew how far behind the power curve I was. I've always been brutally honest with myself in that regard. And I called one of the guys I mentioned earlier, Warren Singleton, and I said, hey, if you could have anybody in the world teach you how to be a paramedic, who would it be and where can I find them? Because I knew even then that education, a lot of education, you do get back what you put in, but a lot of it's where you go. Right. You need to go somewhere that'll.
That's 100% correct.
Yeah. It's not about the name attached to the institution. It's about the street credit of the instructor. And he referred me to a guy named Billy Shelton. And I went through that paramedic course, about halfway through, Billy got another offer, which I don't blame him for taking. He had to leave kind of halfway through, and another guy came in. His name's Dave Cutterback. Dave Cutterback is one of the biggest pieces of the paramedic I am today, because he loved the technical aspect of it, and he is intelligent enough to explain it at that level. And for a guy who couldn't get enough of it, Dave was the person who had those answers, you know. And if he didn't have it, he'd go find it, you know. And that was a huge part of my paramedic level education. So you'll see me do that today, because this is kind of the first time I'm telling my story. I want to make sure I give people credit.
Well, I could definitely tell you're very appreciative.
I couldn't have done this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd have made a good effort, to be sure, you know, and I'd have tried hard, and I'd have learned as much as I could. But, you know, without a mentor to invest in you, good luck.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I try to mentor people now.
And what school did you go to?
James Sprunt Community College.
James, and where's that at?
Kenansville, North Carolina.
Okay.
It's a fantastic place to go. I ran the paramedic program there for years. I say ran. I was the head instructor. I'm not a fantastic administrator. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
Now, I had a great level 2 who was my administrator. Brian Whitfield is his name. And he did 2 very important things. He covered up for my insanity, right?
Yeah.
And he shielded me from the insane bureaucracy, so that I could focus just on lecture and quality of education. So without him as, one, my bulletproof vest, you know, and 2, my radar to help me sort of dodge any potential conflicts I would have had with the college system and his guidance, I don't think we'd have been as successful as we were. And you'd have to check the numbers with the state, but we were incredibly successful. Average program loses 50% of its people to cardiology. I averaged 8%.
Wow.
And my guys could come out and look at a STEMI. They could tell you what blood vessel was blocked, you know, within reason. Those are statistics. They could identify Brugada, you know, those things. And it was nothing more than I invested in them, you know. So I didn't unlock any sort of magic code. It was, I told them, if you'll bring the motivation, I'll bring the rest. But it's all a product of the great people I've had along the way.
And you're exactly right. And the whole idea of a mentor is something that I think we miss in the education side, because when you're in that field, when you're in the education part of it, and you're learning, and you step outside the education, if you don't have that mentor, then you struggle.
Oh, yeah. And people turn it down too, right? Everybody wants to be a self-made man, a self-made woman. And, I appreciate that sentiment. And as much as anybody, I definitely built what I have from the ground up. But without those mentors along the way, I mean, it just wouldn't have been what it is.
Yeah. So, and how old were you when you went to medical school?
Let's see. It was 2011. So I was born in 84. I was about 25 or so.
Okay.
I'm just spitballing. I'm not actually doing the math. I'm
tired. How many years was it take you to get through? Because I'm assuming you had to get your EMT, or did you have your EMT?
They gave me educational credit for the national registry I had as an EMT.
Okay.
So the way that it worked out was the medic course wasn't going to start until the following year, which was, say, 6 months after when I called. I said, well, look, man, I'm ready to get in the game, because at that point I couldn't even ride on an ambulance.
Yeah. I
had applied for reciprocity with the state of North Carolina. It wasn't that they turned it down; they just never responded. Tell you, they just never responded. It's the state. So I went through the intermediate course with that sort of educational basic credit, and I started the medic course the day before the intermediate ended, and I began working as an intermediate during the medic course. The whole process took about 2 years, because it was 6 months or so of intermediate, and then the year and a half or so to become the paramedic. And that was when I got the certificate. The degrees came later,
Okay.
So around February 2012, I became an actual paramedic, a full-fledged paramedic. The medic in the way that we use that word out here.
Yeah. And how did you feel becoming a paramedic?
it was a great sense of accomplishment because I had learned so very much. I had also kind of made a deal with myself that I was going to be at the top of that class if it killed me.
Nice. Yeah.
And I did. I graduated at the top of the class. It was sort of a catharsis. When you leave the military, you lose your purpose in life. This has been inexorably tied to who you were. I was a war fighter. I was a door kicker. I was cool in my own. I had all my hair. I had a bunch of muscles. I had all these things that every young man wants to have. I had my adventure. I got my medals and these things that are important. And then it's gone. It's all gone. And you have lost your ability to, we'll call it practice medicine because I don't have a better word for it, right? So I went from functioning like a PA in Iraqi clinics in other countries to unable to start an IV. And that's a heavy hit. And when I became a paramedic and was in government service working 911, I felt repurposed. I felt better about myself. And the reason I would kind of take a minute to elaborate on that is a lot of guys, I think a lot of guys take their own life in that transition period because they have to find a new mission. And I had found my new mission of service. It was supporting my family, the family we were trying to start. And it was just this really big deal. It's one of the happier moments of my life.
Nice.
To get that because it did not come easy. Dave doesn't just let anybody graduate. It's not just grades, it's integrity.
Sure.
If you're a cutback medic, people know. In my area, people know that you at least know what you're doing. And that was also very empowering to me to have people say, who was your medic instructor? And I'd say, it was Billy and Dave.
Sure.
And that at least let them know this guy's squared away, for the time being. You know what I mean?
When I was in medic school, I had two professors. I take it back. I had three instructors. Doug Gillespie, Mark, and Chris Elderman, who came in midways. And Chris Elderman, who I work alongside of, he's a lieutenant in our service. Chris Elderman said to me during my TSOP, he said, Shannon, if you can find you a mentor as soon as you get out of here, you're going to go a long way in this. And I'll never forget that. And he actually became my mentor.
Awesome.
And I can't speak highly of Chris because I don't know about you, but when I got out, I tried to guide or follow the same style as someone, and that was Chris Elderman, because he always seemed to always be cool, calm, collective on real bad calls. And he always talked about, getting the goat back in the pen before it gets out of control, and
right,
and telling me to calm down. And so, you're exactly right. Say all that to say this. You're exactly right.
Yeah,
it really is important who that instructor is.
It's huge, and then to use your words, to paraphrase, to model sort of who you want to be, and my treatment modalities and the way I talk to people, it's an amalgamation of the best parts of the best people that I've interacted with. If nothing else, they all set an example. And, like everything else in life, if it's not obvious, I found my own way of doing things. And it was a very unique situation for me. I was a military medic, which we have a million of, but I wasn't, and they told me quickly, you're not like the other guys we've met. I don't embellish. I'm very proud of what I did. I'm not ashamed of what I didn't do. So I have no need of telling incredible war stories. My one cool I got blew up story is embarrassing. It's terrible. It's during food poisoning. Yeah. It's getting kicked when you're down.
Yeah.
So when I started to kind of cut teeth there, and I had the qualities of the duck, the feet under the water paddling. I could stay cool in a bad situation because I'd been in several bad situations. But it was the processing of the new information was also somewhat difficult when you're trying to decide different cardiac rhythms or, just a million other things. Is this Cushing's, but the guy's also bleeding to death? Maybe he can't maintain the hypertension.
Yeah.
Just putting all those things. I mean, I can remember printing off EKGs and every county's got its little heart disease capital and reading that EKG and going, can it do that?
Yeah.
Can it be both of those things at the same time? So it was unique to try to process all that information, but as many times as I was confused, I didn't show it. And I think that gave me a really strong start in my agency. Because, if all else fails, if you can fake it till you make it, where nobody on scene, the patient or your coworkers, has a clue that you're a little nervous, then that's 90% of the battle. If you can keep that heart rate down, avoid the information overload, have a disciplined thought process where you don't let too many what ifs come in at the time, and run through a differential diagnosis like a computer. That's as an FTO later, that was the biggest battle I would see paramedic students fight, is that information overload.
Sure.
Where your brain tries to open every page of every book you've read all at once to find a diagnosis instead of letting the situation guide you to it. It's just one of those things.
Have you seen the movie Minority Report?
I want to say I have. Is that with Tom Cruise?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So I've always, and this may be silly as I'll get up. This is how I've always pictured it. Is if you remember Minority Report, he gets that little ball. It says, "Here's your assailant," or "Here's your antagonist." Here's the person that's getting ready to get murdered.
Right.
And he's trying to figure out all these things
before the crime happens.
And so I've always pictured it in my head going in on the scene and almost being like Minority Report, where I start to get this idea. Here's my patient. Here's the symptoms.
Yep.
All right. And start working through those vitals and say, well, it's not that. Blood sugar's out. It's not that. It's not that. And then trying to narrow that down to that diagnosis. And I've always had that picture in my mind. And that's how I kind of when I run through these calls, as the best I can, is trying to get that differential diagnosis, trying to get everything on the board that it could be, and then trying to work that out.
Mine is similar. I modeled mine after a guy that we revered. He ended up being my company commander later. His name was Jim McCann, Special Forces medic, did all kinds of stuff around the world, became a PA, and then went into leadership over a company full of medics. And he was 19. He called me Kid Carr. That was my nickname. If I ran into him today, he would call me Kid Carr.
That's nice.
And I just revered the way he looked like a computer running through his differential. And he sort of gave me some tips on how to approach trying to do it his way. It involved a huge knowledge of pathophysiology, which he had. But he was also similar to me in the way that he sort of sponged up as much as he could. So it was fairly, I'm not going to say easy, but it felt very natural to approach it from there. And that's sort of how it runs is on the way to the call, I have my preconceived notions. You sort of remind yourself, don't get tunnel vision, right? Dispatch can only give you the part of the story that they got. And, as we teach our students, chief complaint does not always translate to the underlying illness, underlying problem, whatever it may be. So I get there and collect information, filter it through a baseline set of vital signs and whatever exam techniques, whether it's physical exam or EKG or both. And now I've got what I would call like a heading, like for a ship. And then from there, I start getting that focused history, physical exam, review of systems. I like to bring the family in. I had this conversation with a retired ER physician just last night after I gave a lecture at Blue Ridge. But one of the students asked me, what's your favorite question to ask somebody when you're taking history? And I said, what do you do for a living? And they kind of looked at me funny, and I said, that is volumes of information. What do you do for a living? Are you accustomed to physical labor? This gives me a gauge into your pain tolerance. If you hang steel for a living, you're probably not a weenie.
Yeah.
If you work in a factory that does textiles, you have chemical exposure, right? You have all this other stuff. So that huge amount of information can be whittled down through a lens, and that's my differential diagnostic process. And then one rule I've always maintained is no matter how sure I am that this is X diagnosis, hammer toe, whatever. No matter how sure I am, I'm willing to turn that on its head if you give me new information. So even after I'm reasonably sure and we've begun a course of treatment, I still continue to collect information because if there's one axiom I wish I could get every student to remember, it's never one thing. There's never one thing wrong with us at any point in time. Now, there's something big that we can fix right now that might make other things better, but it's never one thing. We are all a giant bag of chemistry that is in many cases poorly maintained, or maybe we've had too many birthdays, whatever it is. And so that's just sort of my approach. Way of putting
it. That's really good to think about. So you went into a government service. And how long were you in the service, government service, EMS service?
I had a quick foray in transport with Johnson Ambulance Service. Lasted about a year as I waited to get into 911, and I did 911 for 10 years.
10 years.
Yep. So 10 years full-time with Duplin County EMS. Can't say enough good things about them. And then like every other medic in the world, I worked part-time everywhere else in the surrounding counties, Lenoir, Wayne, because I was on a 24/72. And, it's great that you're bringing people back from the dead, but when you're doing it for $14.15 an hour, that's not buying formula.
Tough.
Yeah. So I worked the extra jobs in different places, and
I think that's a kind of, unfortunately, I don't say a given, but I mean it's what it is. If you go into the world of emergency services, you're going to have another job or two.
It used to come with great benefits. That it used to come with fantastic medical insurance and stuff, but in the way that part of the world has changed in the recent decade, it's a hard road to hoe. You do it either for the love of it, or in some cases because those people can't go anywhere else. It's a shame that it's such a dichotomy, but I like to think you find more people who love it than you do bad apples.
Sure.
And in that respect, that's a good thing. But we really need to do better for those people because they're working themselves into an early grave. Like, what is the average lifespan of a medic on the truck now? 10 years?
Yeah. If that.
And it's usually debilitating back injuries, the reason we lose them. So it affects their quality of life permanently. And at least in my case, as my body broke down, I could go to the VA, but I mean, what do they have? They have nothing.
It's true.
So and I don't want to open that can of worms this early, I guess, but we need to do better for them.
Yeah.
We really do.
Agreed, 100%. And I think that's one of the things that we're continuing to fight for in regards to continuing to push ourselves to be better because, people need to see, hey, what we do, because a lot of times they don't know what we do. And you made a comment earlier that was dead on, is that what people are starting to understand who we are as emergency service, being a paramedic, what we do. And I think the more we push that out, the more people understand that, the better they understand the need for that.
Absolutely. And I am fortunate that I had this exposure to the medical world prior to becoming a paramedic, so I could sort of bring fresh perspective and like to put that in context. The Army medics that I was with, because remember, we're reservists. We're National Guardsmen.
Sure.
So some of those guys worked transport back when the big business convalescent transport was going, and some of those guys worked 911, and they said, you got to watch this movie called Bringing Out the Dead. I watched it. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I didn't understand anything about it. 3 years after I got into EMS, I go back and I watched it, and I said, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah. It's art.
So, yeah, it is. So that context I got later, and that did help me understand and relate the public's idea a little better, and I use that to educate and try to reshape the public's view now when I speak to people to help them understand that we don't drive to the hospital anymore. It's not a meat wagon, not in any way, shape, or form. This whole why did they stop working on my relative in the home? It's because outside of pericardiocentesis, there's nothing that ER is going to do when the heart stops that the paramedic won't do, can't do, shouldn't do. It's all the same, and it's purpose built that way. And it wasn't something that we invented or said, let's try. It's endorsed by those same ER physicians and those worldwide researchers that said, it's a bad idea to do CPR during transport. And this is just one small piece of it, right? There's countless ways in which we rearrange body chemistry and change processes, and we do these field diagnoses and fix quote unquote heart rhythms and, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And it's hard to get the public to understand that. But I think it's happening. I think it's getting better. But we're more than what it has been perceived to be up until now. And I hope that things like this help people understand that, and that this is no longer at its core a technician level job. These are degreed professionals. You can now get your bachelor's in emergency medical care. Western Carolina, go Cats.
Sure.
I'm a product of that. And this new degree push now for the associates, this, and if you go through a good program, this is the equivalent of the ADN. In the nursing world. The difference is, whereas nursing are trained to be support staff, day one, it's all about diagnosis and treatment. And I know we're not supposed to throw that word around and yada, 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 but
that's what we do.
Right. 100%. If I push something in your vein that will kill you if I'm wrong, based on what I have found, it's diagnosis and treatment. But see, even that's not Kentucky windage. It's all based upon principle, standard of care. Nobody's inventing this information. We're just learning the same stuff.
Sure.
And if you don't believe that paramedics understand things at a very intimate level, you come over to the house. I'll pull up my YouTube follower list, and I'll let you see how many physicians are on it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? General practice physicians who don't read EKGs every day, who don't do STEMIs every day, who understand they have to refresh. And the reason I say that is to illustrate that it's not that we're some kind of epic superhero thing, but we're just this really highly specialized section in emergency medicine, pre-hospital medicine. And the way I relate that to people is I know a whole lot about very little. But in that little section of the medical world, I am highly trained, and so are my colleagues.
And I think that's what, and I'm not speaking on behalf of your education, because once you're telling me and what I'm hearing, I sense that this was a main focus of your education. But one of the things that I sense a lot of times is doctors want us to know this pathophysiological. But when it comes to the education of a medic, we spend not maybe a 2 or 3 pages in, whatever book you're using, Nancy Caroline, American Orthopedic Surgeon, whatever. You spend 2 or 3 pages of pathophysiology, and the rest of, okay, here's some emergency things you need to know. But pathophysiology is important.
It is, and I would very much love to see us move out of the realm of the generic pathophysiology and begin moving more like a medical school-based curriculum where we look into histology and things like that, because some of the information that's given to us is now presented almost out of context, because in the beginning, when the field was burgeoning, it was violently oversimplified, as it needed to be. You were taking guys off the street, I get it, right? The Rampart,
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep,
We've hit this period now where you can't walk in the classroom without a certain placement test score or having revamped and redone your prerequisites, right? That sounds curiously like nursing school. We're approaching the education from a higher starting point, and we now have a much more advanced finishing point. And I don't think our current educational modalities are going to keep pace with it much longer. At this point, we've sort of built a race car, but we're still running the old U-Haul tires on it. And that's one of the reasons, I'm considering heavily pursuing a master's and a doctorate in education. Is it's going to have to start somewhere, and this is going to take so much work and patience and so many migraines that it's going to have to be somebody who's in it for the love of the game. I'm one of those guys.
I'm excited about that.
I'm excited. I'm building a team right now. I actually sat down in Jackson, Mississippi the other day and had dinner with a fantastic guy, Charlie Swearingen, and who is in his own right a genius, but he's very humble. And so many people have asked on TikTok, I wish I could watch this for CEUs. And I said, let's do it. He's laid the groundwork. He's already doing it. I said, bring me into the fold. In his own way, he's going to become one of my mentors. I don't think he knows it yet. He's going to show me an area of the educational process I'm not familiar with, and we're gonna try to put that out, and we're gonna do it at. And I'm not plugging it. It doesn't exist yet. You can't go buy it yet, but it's something that we want people to look at, even our CEUs differently. You know, a lot of times, why do we go to Con Ed? To be able to renew 4 years from now without a big hassle.
Yep.
I want people to approach Con Ed with the idea that I'm going to learn a lot more today than I knew. I'm going to walk out of this sharper. And to lay the groundwork to make people more receptive to that, we have to change a lot of our educational modalities in the very beginning.
Yeah, 100%.
And
I agree.
We lose a lot with education through, I'm going to steal a word from Pat McNamara. It's called institutional inbreeding, where you take a paramedic. Our careers are very short these days, and they got a year or two in the game, and they're educating. So many of the concepts that upon which they educate are things they've only heard about, and so they're relaying these in a poor fashion through no fault of their own, but they've not had a chance to see the myths busted. You know how many paramedic educators are still teaching that, you know, if you are curious about your halo test, put your glucometer into the suspected CSF, and if it reads high, it's CSF. And it's not true. It's never been. Your CSF is going to be almost identical to your blood glucose. Little things like that, you know, getting rid of that. We're going to have to go much more in depth with initial education.
Yeah.
In order to be able to produce something at the end of it that has a much greater understanding. Because you can't expect everybody to get everything through experience. You know, I would love to see us shift from a clearing process, just speaking of education, to more like a residency process, where you have to ride with someone who's some kind of credential to field educate you, the same way an intern has to have an attending.
Sure.
You know. But anyway, that's that.
Well,
I get off on tangents.
I think you're on a brilliant path, and I think you're on a groundbreaking path. I think, and I wish you all the luck on that, because if there's anything I believe needs to change, it's our education process in regards to medicine and these medics who get out here in this field. And one of the disappointing things, because that's the thing I would love to see, is I would love to see medics, people who are coming in for in-services, continuing education hours, coming in eager to learn something new, instead of, all right, we're going to go through the same slides.
Yep.
We're going to go through the same rhetoric, and I'm going to leave here with 8 to 16 hours of CEUs, and I may be a little bit better for it. And that's one thing I think we had done recently, is we had asked everyone, and I don't know if you've met Jeff Henshaw yet.
I don't think so.
Jeff Henshaw is a PA up at Baptist. He's an amazing educator.
That's a credential within itself.
Yeah.
Just working there.
Yeah. Yeah. And he always asks, what's one thing you learned today? And I think that's so important, to be able to walk out of a room changed in some way, shape, or form. And so, man, I applaud you on that, and I really encourage you to don't stop pursuing that.
I'm not. People are hungry for it.
Absolutely, they are.
You have to look at how convoluted it's gotten. Like, imagine the amount of mental acceptance in the mundane process that it takes for it to have hit the point that it is now, where, I'm trying to think of a way I can say this without getting sued. Look at the online educational platforms utilized by 99% of EMS agencies. Could they exist and function outside of an environment where expectations for Con Ed were so low? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our expectations for Con Ed and being able to walk away having learned anything, they're in the gutter. They're so low. 7 hours of airway, I need 8 hours of cardiac, so much neonatology.
Yeah.
It's a scavenger hunt. Nobody is approaching Con Ed thinking, I want to learn something, except for guys that are going for FPC but it shouldn't be relegated to the specialties.
I agree.
In a field that's ever changing, how do we not have new information every 6 months? It doesn't make any sense.
Why can't everybody be critical care?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you.
It's one of those things. I love critical care. I love chemistry. I love labs. I know guys that have no interest in it whatsoever, but it's not because they're lazy. It's because they want to be street medics. And I look at it like the military. We need somebody to design the rocket, and we need shooters too. You need door kickers and doctors. You need it all. There's no reason we shouldn't be investing in sharpening the edge of a street medic. And again, you can't say it enough. In a field where everything changes every 5 minutes, and we show up once a quarter for 8 hours, how do we not have new information? You know, it's out there. It's always been out there. But we're phoning it in. You know, we're phoning it in so the level 2 can call the state and say, recertify him, he's got his stuff. Got to get out of that. This pulse and that's led to the pulse and the patch mentality that we have. It's not as simple as staffing adequate personnel to satisfy whatever contract you have with the county. Are we or are we not providing care to our fellow man in their worst hour? Are you signing for NARC keys, or are you signing for the health and safety of 1/8 of the population of a county?
Nice.
I like to believe it's the latter.
Yeah. Great.
If that's the case, why are we not training to that? It's the reason that special forces operators right now are not training in Cold War tactics. They're training in counterterrorism. The world changed. They changed with it. We can afford to do no less. You know, not if we want to keep this alive.
Man.
You know.
Well, I wish you luck on that.
Appreciate it.
To continue to 10 years on a truck, and then where did you go from there?
10 years on a truck. So I'd been fighting the med school battle. At that point, I'd been accepted once. I did this kind of weird thing where I applied to a school I didn't necessarily want to go to do a recon process on secondaries, interviews, essays. And then in my mind, if I landed an interview where I really wanted to go, I'd be able to put my best foot forward. And I did so. Worked out. I didn't land an interview with my dream school, which was the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. And there's you know, it's not just because my family's from West Virginia. It's because they've been #1 in the nation for training rural physicians for just decades and decades. So if you want to be a good doctor in the middle of nowhere, they have all the credentials to turn you into that, right? And I've always wanted to serve the rural populations. They need it the most. I'm not in it for the money. I've never been, you know. So I kind of had that set up and ready to go, and had what I'd call a reasonable secondary school, because they would have turned me into a good physician. And I looked at my daughter, who was 8. I looked at my wife. I've given up so much time with them in this life. And I kind of had to do some soul searching. My father worked very hard for us. He was gone a lot. I was kind of sitting at the precipice of you know, making this decision, and I had a realization. I have the choice that my father never had. I can generate good income. I can provide for them. I can be around. I need to make a decision. Do I want to press the fast forward button on my daughter's life and not really be around until she's 17 or 18? Or do I want to take a minute to figure this out? You know, what's more important to me, being a doctor or a dad? Well, I'd rather be a dad. So I decided to maybe do something different for at least a while. So I ran an urgent care. My doctor is my friend. I also work for him. We like to drink scotch. Great guy. His wife bought an urgent care. I started working there part-time and became the clinical supervisor there. I did that for a little while. And, you know, great job, great people, great everything. Great clinical experience. They had a nurse practitioner there I called the professor because he was always ready to teach. I learned so much there. And from there, I moved on to doing mobile integrated healthcare. I needed a little more, and it was sort of a hospital at home thing. And I did that for a company out of North Carolina. You know, good people for the most part. A fairly mundane form of paramedicine because there's not a lot of decision making, but it's juxtaposed. There's a trade-off because you can learn so much. You're working directly with physicians every day. That was good. It ended abruptly. Outside of my control. And at that point, I had accidentally gained the TikTok following. That happened completely by accident.
So you had started TikTok.
I had started TikTok right before this opportunity ended.
Okay.
And I think I had, say, 30 or 40,000 followers when that ended. And I lost that job. It's the only job I've ever been fired from in my whole life. I'm not willing to go any deeper than that publicly. We have sort of a handshake agreement that I won't give them a black eye, and I'll leave it at that.
But
So
you had started TikTok.
I had started TikTok while I was at that job.
So since we're there, what made you start doing TikTok?
It's insane. All right. Completely by accident. So what had happened was around 20 whatever, I scrapped all my social media. It was so negative all the time. People, they got into this political opium of the people, and they're just so mean and so nasty to each other all the time. I don't care if you're left or right wing. There's always somebody nasty. Politically, I'm homeless. I don't get in a camp. I just can't. I can't sacrifice a single one of my values for the greater good, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
So I just got rid of all of it. But my friends would send me TikToks that were funny, and I couldn't open them. So I started a TikTok account. I called it Shade Tree Cardiology because that is sort of an anonymous thing. And no followers. Hadn't made any content. I did it just to open text messages.
How long did you have it before you made any content?
I don't know. A long time.
Really?
I mean, maybe, I don't know, a year more. And I had just finished a cardiology contract at James Sprunt, where I went. I taught cardiology for him. And the students had given me some praise at the end of it. We love how you can break the concepts down. So you can, because this is not how I always talk, right? My family's from West Virginia, right? We're from the holler, you know what I mean? So I can break it down, right? I speak their native tongue, right? In the languages I speak. So we started joking about that in class, and I was chuckling about it. I was on the way to a call. It was going to be a long one too. I had to do like a vancomycin and a magnesium infusion. It's going to take forever. We give magnesium in 2 minutes, right? You give 1 gram an hour in the internal medicine world. So anyway, make a long story even longer. I did this ACLS translation. So this is sort of hyperbolic take on recording myself and hearing it back. And that was kind of born from when I recorded my first video for the YouTube. The first thing that goes through my mind is, good God, do I sound like that? Is that how I sound?
Yeah.
So I did the little voice recording. So I'm holding the phone, and it's one of those, I try to make it sound semi-educated, patient presents with ventricular ectopy and yada, yada, yada. And then when I play it back, it's that now famous line of, squiggly lines on that demon box look like an epileptic holding an Etch-a-Sketch. They better get some of that Ramarodon, and I posted that video to TikTok and sent it to my 4 friends that I knew that were always sending me stuff. Yeah. I go in and run this call, and it's 2 or 3 hours to do this with this patient and get all this stuff and collect the labs. I come back out and I check my text messages, and nobody had responded to it. So I thought, well, maybe they just commented on the video. So I clicked the video, and it's 30,000 views in this 4 hours. And I said, oh my God, what have I done? Because at this point I'm content to die in obscurity. I don't, no social media, no presence. Yeah. And I showed it to my wife. By the time I'm home, it's 100,000 views when I'm off shift, So yeah, it happened fast. It's well over 1 million now. I used to have it pinned, and, I show it to her, and I said, I don't know what to do. Do I take it down? She said, no, you make people laugh. People like to laugh. And I've tried to be the funny guy, for a long time. So I said, okay, well, I was talking to a guy that I worked with there. His name's Grant. I don't know how anonymous he wants to be, but I'll give you his first name. I consider him a friend to this day. I would bounce ideas off Grant. He was very non-judgmental, and even with my weirdness, he was cool with it. And I said, I don't know how to approach this, man. What do you think? And he said, just do it. Just throw videos out there. It doesn't matter. It's okay. I said, okay, why not? And then it hit me, we'll do some educational stuff. The YouTube thing is good, but they're long and they're technical and they take forever to make. So do some explanations, get people laughing. And when the dopamine's high, hit them with some information that's directly connected to memory, right? It's the hypothalamus. So, geez, Lord, the hippocampus, not hypothalamus. Yeah. So, I said, why not? So I took a stab at it in August of last year that I was going to do that. That became what it is today. I think it's 210,000 followers now.
Last I looked, it was like 210.
Yeah, it grows sometimes by 1,000 a day. It's weird, but that's how TikTok kind of came to be, and I've just approached it by always being my weird self. And throwing the information out there, and debate when needed, sometimes clapping back when needed, but I also like to make fun of how the truth is stranger than fiction in EMS sometimes. And because I don't work for a 911 agency anymore, I can say what people are thinking. I can make them laugh without losing my job because I work offshore now. And I think that also is big to people because they can send these videos to each other, but because they didn't make it, they're not going to lose their job.
Yeah. And so you just mentioned that you don't have to tell you put any type of whereabouts or the name, but you now are working offshore.
Yes, sir. I work for a company that supplies specifically paramedics to deep water platforms because that's a regulation is if you're that far off the shore, you have to have at least a paramedic, and your average fresh out of school paramedic, they can't function in those environments. You have to have some time in your belt. I'm very proud to work for them. And in person, I'll tell anybody who I work for. I have that agreement with my employer. The only reason I don't do it publicly is in case I say something later. I don't want my name inexorably tied to them that could give them a black eye if I have a hot take on something.
Agreed.
They're that good of people. I wouldn't want to put them in that position.
And what made you? I mean, how did you get connected with an organization like that?
Well, TikTok. So after that job, the MIH job abruptly ended.
Yeah.
I wanted a new adventure. Emphasis on adventure. I don't know if it's like the Viking genetics or if it's just who I am, but I like dangerous things. I enjoy a challenge that I'm not sure whether or not I can meet. I like being a little tired, a little hungry, a little scared, to quote one of my heroes. And I kind of threw it out there on TikTok. Hey, I'm looking for a new adventure, a new opportunity. I need it to pay well. I have a family. But, understand I do good work for good money. And I'd like for it to be an adventure and hopefully something I haven't done before. And if at all possible, something that incorporates everything I've done. So clinical, emergency, that. And there was this guy, the remote medic is his handle. He's my boss now. He sent me a message and said, have you ever thought about working offshore? I said, what's that? I had no idea this whole world existed.
Didn't either.
So he gave me a brief rundown. I shot him my phone number. We had a phone call, and he just explained sort of the crux of the whole thing. And then we started talking about expanded privileges, which was huge. Sutures are back on the table.
Nice.
Prescribing antibiotics is back on the table. All these things I really missed from my military career. We're there. We have medical direction when it's something that's a little outside of my wheelhouse. Like the last time I treated prostatitis, I got the doctor actually on the phone. A lot of times when I'm giving out antibiotics for a sinus infection, I check a box that sends it to medical direction, and they review it they've got so many hours that they review it. So it's all up to snuff and within best standards and practices, but it's protocol guided. The protocols are just really, really in depth, and you're expected to know a certain amount of the medicine. You are also expected to call when you're unsure. So you're expected to have the humility to say, I've not done this before. And that's the root of your trust, So I got into that through that, and the remote medic sent me a message, and within 2 weeks after we exchanged that first message, I'm in a fake helicopter getting dunked upside down, and I got to knock a window out and escape to prove I can do that, because you ride helicopters out of the rig. It's a course of training called TQ, Tropical Helicopter Escape Training.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something underwater escape training. Yeah. It's really cool.
Know that was such a thing either.
I didn't either. I was a little nervous at first, but when they dunk you in and you're just sitting there and it's partially submerged, and you got to hit your little harness, and you get this little miniature scuba tank, and you got your little life vest, and you're in a wetsuit, and then they drop it into water and turn it upside down, and the pool's hyperchlorinated. I couldn't open my eyeballs underwater or anything, so you got to do it all kind of blind. You put your elbow in the window and you knock it out, and you escape out and get to the top. And if you do all that, then you're qualified. And there's something called BOSIA, which is, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's all swimming. You have to show you can swim and swim together, and get into a life raft and get out, and you have to be underwater with your eyes closed and pull yourself along a rail, breathing through your apparatus, so you can, and you have to be able to do it all without running out of air, because it's it's only a couple of breaths in this bottle. It's just enough to get out of a helicopter. And all this fun stuff. I did that in Gray, Louisiana. was the name of the town. And I think they let me go home for Thanksgiving, and then they sent me to the rig.
Wow.
And it was that quick, boots on ground, so to speak, even though there was no ground out there. And I've been on that rig with that team since December. At first it was like drinking from a fire hose.
Sure.
Now they're my second family. They invested in me because you have 5 jobs. I mean, realistically, my job is not to sit around and wait for you to get sick. I deal with aspects of the oil field. I enter in numbers and things that deal with what's put through the pipeline and things like that. They invested in me, teaching me these processes and how it works. And I told them day one, if you get sick, I got you. I got 20 years in. Anything dealing with the oil field, I'm an idiot. I have no idea. And I think they appreciated that humility. Yeah. And that's kind of how it came about.
Is so insane.
It is. Life is that way though. If you just let it be. Yeah. But it's a good insane. It's for the first time in my life. I'm very happy with the money I'm making. And I have time to spend it. Very rarely do you get those two things in EMS. Usually you have plenty of money and no time to spend it, or you have no money and you have time to spend money if you had it. As strange as it sounds, I get more quality time with my wife and daughter now.
Really?
Yep, because I had to work 28 days a month sometimes, to not just to make ends meet, but to get out of debt, to stay out of debt, Now, I mean, you do remarkably well working offshore. You have to have credentials and time and grade to even get considered for the job. But it's great. You hit the beach with, you got money in the bank and your kid's tuition is paid and everything is done. You have a very fulfilling job, but it comes at that cost, that 2 weeks, or for some of the guys I'm friends with, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You can't see them. You can't touch them. That's the hard part. So, I'll romanticize it a lot, and I think people like thinking about that end of it. And it's certainly like being an infantry medic again, which I enjoy. I know all my guys and their last names and their children's names and their allergies and their conditions, and I like that. But it comes at the cost of, your kid hanging on your leg, crying, begging you, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. And you fight that battle, every couple of Thursdays. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. Just to put it all in context, it's not all romantic, It's neat, but there's a price. You know what I mean?
There's always a sacrifice.
Always. But again, it comes with that added thing of I can hit the beach for 2 solid weeks, and I can be in the Atlanta airport and text my wife, pack a bag. Don't tell her where we're going. I'll book a couple of tickets or a hotel stay and just surprise her. And we just went to Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
And let my kid run around a chocolate factory. You know what I mean? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's talk about your impact. I know you probably don't see it, but I'm going to tell you that it's there in regards to your videos. And you made a comment earlier about the physicians that are there. There's no question, because your knowledge in this is so easy to follow. How did you adapt? How did you get to that point?
That was a survival tactic. So, growing up, we had a pretty good amount of discipline in the household, and it was a big religious component. So when you were going to deviate or do something outside of the norm, you really had to state your case. So I've had a million imaginary conversations in my head between that, growing up in NCOs in the military, and when I got in trouble in high school, of what I would have said, and reading a lot, being sort of an introverted kid, getting in trouble for asking the questions that made people uncomfortable. I would just turn to books and just read. So my vocabulary got bigger. And as I would talk to people and just have conversations about these new things, whatever my most recent ADD fixation was when I was a kid, I'd want to relate these things to people in a way they could understand. And I couldn't use whatever jargon I'd recently learned. So just, kind of amplify that over time. And then I started teaching, the younger medics, of course, when I was in the service, the guys coming in, I was the senior medic. And then teaching Iraqi medics was another one. And then learning other languages was a big part of it. And I'm getting to the point. You begin sort of learning how to make phrases that have maximum impact.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, you learn how to do that on the fly. And that, over the years, has become one of my strong suits, is the ability to not necessarily simplify a concept. The concepts I give are not always simple, but they are related to something that people understand.
Yeah.
So coming from working class people, still being a working class person, if you work on cars, I can explain it in a way you can understand. If you know anything about pretty much anything, just given the life that I've lived and everywhere that I've been, I know a little bit about a lot. I can explain it in a way that people find relatable, because there aren't that many systems that function all that differently from each other, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things in our physical world are very similar. So just developing that ability on the fly to kind of relate the information and convey it in a way that people found relatable was just refined over time, in terms of, stating your case as a child, moving into early adulthood in high school, and getting in trouble for something that was out of the norm, but being able to state your case and negotiate. And some of it may be intrinsic and genetic. I see it in my daughter. And we have kind of a rule. I never want to be a because I said so dad. So if she can make a good point, no matter how much I don't like it, I'll concede.
Yeah.
And this kid negotiated into eating cookies for breakfast one time, but she made a good point, So yeah, well, that's how the world works, right?
Yeah.
If you can state your case and you can convince people, you can quote unquote get your way, or you can get people to see it your way. So it just is like this highly refined process that happened over time, where I could talk to people and learning how to gain their attention, learning how to keep their attention, learning how to lighten the mood, but maybe not too much, and you create an entire scenario from your tone of voice to your linguistic prosody and the way that you enunciate in such a manner that they are ready to hear the information you have to relate. So it's not just what you say or how you say it or how you broke it down. It's the entire construct. And just over time, I sort of learned how to do that in a classroom, in a conversation. And I recognize it as a fantastic tool to be able to spread the knowledge base that people want. And to add on to it a little bit, by simplifying things down to the simplest point they can be while still being correct without jargon, I think it shows people who believe that information or that understanding of that information to be out of their grasp. I think it shows them that it's well within their reach and that they can master it if they want to. And I think that empowerment is also a huge part of why the message is so relatable and why people like for me to understand it, because it's not a neurologist speaking in terms that they can't understand. It's someone just like them, who had to learn this just like them, who wants to show it to them. And I think it was Shakespeare who said, a good leader speaks the language of the people. So, my target audience is always in mind. My target audience is me, a couple of years ago. These guys are me. We're all the same. We're just trying to do the best we can here.
You're doing it.
So,
well, you're doing it, man. You're really doing it. One of the things that I like to do with everybody is give you 5 questions. And it's 5 very simple questions to kind of help people identify more with you as a emergency service and what you do. And it's first question is this: what's your favorite music?
Oh man, I'm a musician, so there's a lot of it that I like. But that said, it's heavy, complicated, syncopated. Are you familiar with gent? Sort of genty. Gent is an onomatopoeia that sort of describes the guitar sound. Yeah, definitely heavy but melodic music that has a lot going on, because it sort of meets the idle speed of my brain.
Okay.
So
what's your favorite band?
I can't say I have a favorite one.
Yeah.
But here lately I've been jamming to a lot of Periphery and Tala. I like new metal a lot. It's making sort of a resurgence.
We just went to speaking of the reason why we went through West Virginia is we just went to Columbus for Sonic Temple.
Oh wow!
It was crazy.
I wanted to go see Avatar. They just came through Georgia, and if you've never been, go. The showmanship is amazing.
Yeah.
The music is next level anyway, and very very awesome. But
I was just listening to Avatar a little while ago.
were you?
Yeah.
My daughter loves Hail the Apocalypse,
Yeah.
and of course I got guitars everywhere, and
Yeah.
I'll turn the amp loud and just do that opening riff with the pinch harmonics, and I got a double lock and Floyd, and wow, she loves it.
Wow.
She's into it. She's got the bug like I do. I got her guitar over Christmas
Nice.
actually, a little short Strat. That Telecaster you guys see me playing when I get home, and with the whole Dr. Feelgood solo and all that good stuff. I bought that to have a guitar tuned to E so she and I could jam, so I could show her. She could play Nothing Else Matters. She could play the
That's
opening
awesome.
notes, because it's all open. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. Music is the most wonderful thing a human being can do in terms of a hobby or relaxation.
Yeah.
And if you don't play music, start. You
Yeah.
can.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. Don't play it for anybody but yourself. It's fine. You'd be surprised the peace in those 6 or 7 or 8 strings, whichever you choose to go with.
Nice. Nice. Question 2. What's your favorite food?
Food. My favorite food is a food I can't really eat much anymore. My favorite food growing up was always spaghetti. Both times I came back from Iraq, that's what I asked my mother to make for me. These days, though, the wheat doesn't like me as much anymore. So I'd have to say my favorite thing to eat on planet Earth is probably my wife's meatloaf.
Nice.
I don't know what she puts in it, but it's amazing.
I'm an equal to that. My wife's meatloaf is probably, I can't testify to your wife's, but my wife's, something about my wife's meatloaf is just amazing.
Yeah, so when she makes it, I try to see how much I can fit in my face, man. It's great.
Do you work out?
Every day.
Every day. All right. So what's your favorite workout?
Favorite workout? The old German volume training. I don't
Schwarzenegger stuff.
Yeah, old Schwarzenegger stuff. I don't lift as heavy as I used to because I don't have a lot of cartilage left. I did go heavy about 2 years ago when I really started trying to get back in shape, and ended up in an MRI machine with a torn pec. I mean, I still lift heavier than probably the average person does, but I respect what my body's trying to tell me now. Just because I can pick it up today doesn't mean I won't be limping for 3 days, But yeah, I have a weird way of working out. I like to do push pull legs. It's my rotation. I work out by myself. It's my zen time. I kind of contemplate what I'm going to do for the day, or maybe process some bad events from the day before, and get all that aggression out. And it's like a form of meditation. But
Nice.
it's definitely weight training.
Yeah.
If you see, I don't like to run anymore. If you see me running, try to keep up.
Yeah.
It's gone bad and I can't fix it.
Yeah. That's good. I'm assuming you probably never watch TV.
These days, it's rare. These days, my television, my wife and I try to find a show that we can enjoy together. So we went through the Peaky Blinders. Now, right now we're in Mr. Robot. We just got into it, and I like it because his brain is my brain.
Yeah.
But he's the negative guy I used to be. I'm much more positive now, just because I've rediscovered the magic in humanity. But there for a while, I had my burnout stage. So yeah, we watched some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. And
Do you have a TV question? Or?
Well, no, I was going to ask you what your TV show you're watching right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're watching Mr. Robot. Now, if you want to sit down and watch movies from the 90s, or the early 2000s, if you want to watch Boondock Saints, I'm there.
Yeah.
Favorite movie of all time is The Princess Bride. I can quote every word. My wife will not watch it with me anymore. She will.
From TV, which I'm a big advocate for, but I'm a more advocate for reading. You're a big reader.
Yep.
What book you reading right now?
Principles of Flight, the U.S. Army's flight manual for rotorcraft.
Wow.
I have decided to pursue my pilot's license.
Good for you.
I always wanted to operate an aircraft. We have a great, we have pilots that come out to the rig. You want to talk about certified badasses. These guys bring a helicopter doing this in offshore winds to an oil rig doing this, and they land it every day. Couple times a day, couple different platforms in a trip, no problem. So one of those guys actually lives, he's just up the road in Hickory. Small world, right? I meet him in the Gulf of Mexico. And he said, I did most of my flight training in a place called Knightdale, North Carolina. Is that close to you? I said 45 minutes.
Wow.
So I got in touch with them, and I'm going to pursue that. So that's what I'm reading right now. I've always got 5 or 6 books, but that's the one I'm nose deep in. Leadership, The Warrior's Art by Christopher D. Kalinda is one I'm kind of going back through.
Mm-hmm.
I recommend that book to anybody. It talks about the great generals like Xenophon and some of the core components of who I am came from that. Like the story of Xenophon, a great story I like to tell new people is Xenophon didn't know if he should go to war. I forget the name of the king, but he goes to the Oracle of Delphi, right? That was sort of their Dionne Warwick of the day, call me now for your free reading and whatnot. So, you remember those, Miss Cleo?
Oh, yeah.
So that was their thing, and his question he's going to ask, I think he goes to Plato first, and he says, should I go do this? Should I go to war, right, with this? He's going to be a general over a mercenary army. And Plato says, go ask the Oracle. So he goes to the Oracle, but in that trip, he has a change of heart, and when he gets to the Oracle, he asks, what gods should I pray to for good fortune? But he basically asks, how can I best do this, right? So he stopped asking if he should or why and started asking how. And that is an axiom by which I live my life now, right? So books like that have a great amount of insight in them. So that's one of the reasons I'm going back through it is that's one of my mantras. I don't ask why you want it done. I ask how you want it done. The latter is more productive.
Wow.
Or I don't ask if I've decided I want to do something. I don't ask why should I do this, or when it gets tough, start reevaluating if I really wanted it by asking why. I just say how. How do I do this? Is it going to be hard? Well, probably. Because difficulties is the measure between effort planned and effort expended. Mm-hmm. So I just plan for everything to be horrible. And then I'm never surprised. Murphy shows up, but he never surprises me. 100%. Yeah. So if you do those two things, you'll find there's very few things in life you can't accomplish.
Wow. Great.
They rarely go as planned, but that's part of the fun.
That's good. Well, this may lead me to my last question. Okay. This is a question I've kind of adapted from Tim Ferriss's theology on interviewing, but I've adapted it towards the emergency service aspect. Tim Ferriss used to say he would always ask his guests on his podcast, if you had a billboard where everybody could see, what would you put on that billboard? My question to you is, if you had a billboard where everybody could see that was an emergency service, what would you want that billboard to say?
Ketamine's not for everything. No. What would I say?
That's a good one.
That's a great one.
That's a good one.
That's a great one.
That's a hot topic, but that's a good one though.
Yeah. For people in emergency services, it would probably be something that made them do some introspection. Something like, you're one diagnosis away from being in their shoes. Never forget that. I had this conversation last night with a group of students that the best thing that can happen to a healthcare provider is about once a year they need to get very sick. Very sick. Norovirus, flu, pneumonia, sepsis. You need to get sick. Mm-hmm. You'll keep that humility. We see compassion fatigue. I'm guilty of it. I've had it. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of times people say, this guy called 911 for what I came to work with. And I understand. Mm-hmm. I was the guy in rhabdo and renal failure who finished his shift. And I've you can ask people, I've literally been T-boned and got out of the ambulance, walked the rest of the way to the call, saw the patient, called in the other unit, and finished my shift urinating blood. Wow. I didn't do that out of the sense of the mission, though. When I was in the military, I might have. I did that so I wouldn't be seen as weak. And I achieved that mentality. Achieved is the wrong word. I ended up with that mentality out of the way that we are so cruel to each other if we show any weakness, or if we dare to be sick, or if we dare to use the hundreds of hours of sick time that we bank. And out of seeing the offline conversations after the fact where they say things like, this guy called 911 for gout. Can you believe that? Gout's not life-threatening, but, I actually had the opportunity, and it was an opportunity. I had the opportunity to have gout. Mm-hmm. It's exquisite.
Yeah.
I wrecked a motorcycle. Yeah, I wrecked a motorcycle in 2005. I broke my ankle. It hurt a lot. Foot peg went through my ankle because I'm a genius, so I wore tennis shoes to drive a motorcycle home from the dealership that I didn't know how to drive. Figured it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I had to choose between those two pain levels, gout and an ankle in 3 pieces, ankle all day long.
So it's pain.
All day long.
Yeah.
That's how painful gout is.
Sure, it is.
It was an opportunity for me to have that experience, because I promise you I'll bust out the fentanyl for gout now.
Yeah.
If you got that big swollen toe. So I think it would be good to have any message on that billboard that would just remind us, you're one diagnosis away from being in their shoes. Never forget that.
That's a good point to think about. Being in that, because I remember one time anxiety was one of those things that people just laughed at. Oh my God, they got anxiety.
Oh, man.
But you know what, man? Anxiety is real. It's a real mental health concern.
PTSD is an overused phrase, but in 2005 when I came home, I had a lot working against me after that first deployment. Things I'd seen, things I'd done. I'm teaching Iraqi medics. I saw 6 of my students blown up. A lot of things that you take in stride over there, and then you come home and you put all that together with, over there you were somebody, you were learning something, you were on a path. Now you're back to you're nobody, you're a 19-year-old kid. The excruciating sense of frustration and destitution, and you combine that with things like PTSD, and you have these uneasy feelings you can't shake, or these times where your body dumps adrenaline for no reason, and you can't remember your PIN number or your phone number, or you can't unlock your phone. And that's an anxiety attack, or to legitimately and truly believe you are dying. We forget that working in medicine. Anxiety will give you that, and it's not only real. We need to pull it out of our understanding in the realm of it just a mental problem, because that hypertension that anxiety gives you is not any less real.
No, you're right.
It's the same hypertension that causes MIs and strokes,
You're right.
hemorrhagic strokes. Why your heart attack's brought on by stress. It's anxiety, man.
Absolutely.
That's what breaks that chunk of plaque off and causes the fibrin to do its thing. And we don't need to look, I'm not saying we should give Versed to every anxiety attack, but if I could teach a class on anything, and you talk about people understanding, I'm still working on a way to get people to understand empathy, to relate that concept. I don't know. Do you know who Patch Adams is?
I do know who Patch Adams is.
Patch Adams,
the real Patch Adams, and the
real
movie.
Patch Adams. Yeah. So I haven't written him lately, but if you write him a letter, if you handwrite him one, he writes back.
No kidding.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. He sent me 2 autographed copies of his books when I sort of laid it all out for him in a handwritten letter, and we exchanged some letters, and he pushed me towards that, and he said, if this is something you do, if you're a teacher and if people listen to you, you need to figure out a way, because this is something I've told medical schools, and I think he said for 30 years, that they need to be teaching a class on empathy, and how, whatever it takes, whatever you have to put the student through, whatever you have to put the intern through, it doesn't matter, but they need to feel helpless and dependent, and all the things that contribute to that feeling of powerlessness that the average person feels, that we in emergency services, whether you're a police officer, we lose touch with that, because we either gain control over a situation, because that's our job, right? We organize chaos, or we have the mantra of EMS, which is, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. I can't fix it. And I know I went off on a tangent. I do that, but I wish we could find a way to teach that. I do the best I can to work it into any curriculum that I have, and I capitalize on moments like that where, you stay with people a year and a half, there's going to be a death in the family of the student body, or there's going to be a serious happening or whatever. And I try to capitalize on that moment and say, don't forget this. When someone's, this is a real call, and I'll relate this story. It's heartbreaking. I'll try to hold my shit together for this, but I can remember. It was an immigrant, and the immigrant's husband died. Husband of 40 years. And of course I ended up being here because I speak Spanish, and so on and so forth. So I get called down to it. they had no one in this country or in this world, really, where they had left everything behind. They come here, and the only person they have in this country, in this world, after 40 years, dies.
Mm.
And in the weeks following, in the aftermath, this person would have syncopal episodes or be all to pieces or what, whatever moniker you want to throw on it. And I literally saw people chalking that up to, after the fact, right? After the fact, they need to get it together. Life goes on. It's easy for you to say.
Sure.
And for everybody who's ever been heartless to a patient's face like that, and I mean this from the bottom of my soul, I hope it happens to you. If you kick somebody when they're down like that, I sincerely hope it happens to you. I just hope it happens in such a way that you're able to prevent the next person from going down, that you take something constructive from that, because that's tough, man.
Wow.
That was tough to watch.
You're right.
It was tough to lose respect for a half a dozen people at one time, watching them have that conversation. Sometimes, we say we see people at their best and their worst. Sometimes their worst is around the water cooler, not when they're stressed.
That's awesome. That's true.
Anyway,
exactly right.
Sorry, I do that.
You're right.
I ramble.
And the thing about it is empathy is you're right. There needs to be a class on empathy, and I think the number one lesson is the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Oh yeah.
And because we get those two confused, and what we have to identify with is empathy is recognizing somebody is in a hole, is in the darkest part of their life, and we need to climb down in that hole with them and embody and it ain't about I know what you're going through. It's I have no idea what you're going through, but I'm just glad you told me. Brene Brown said that. I didn't make that up. Brene Brown said that. And that's beautiful. My
line is I can't imagine, but I'm here for you.
Oh man, yep.
And one thing I would recommend to people is we have a lot of people who have attention deficit and perhaps mild autism. It's me. I'm a lot of people, but I have it. I have one of my former students was an LPC, and she's a wonderful person. Ashley, she said, take this test, and if you're comfortable, will you share the numbers with me? And of course, I scored 3 times the needed amount, and she said, yeah, I knew this the whole time, but did you? I said, well, it's suspected. So we have a lot of those people in our field, and they're drawn to the field, and thank God, because they can run like computers in terrible situations. But it leaves something to be desired sometimes on the empathy and the sympathy front. And one of the pieces of advice I'll give those people is you can kill 2 birds with one stone. If you want to build sympathy and empathy and make some accomplishments in life, all you have to do is pursue greatness. Take a risk and pursue greatness, and I'll tell you why. Greatness can only be achieved through suffering. I promise you.
That's good.
I promise you, nothing comes without sacrifice and suffering. Nothing worth having.
I needed to hear that.
And at the end of that, you'll be a more understanding person. When somebody goes, hey, look, Shannon, your dreams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you learn what it takes to get that news, and in 30 minutes later walk in the door and be a husband or a wife or a mother or a father. And learn how to take that in stride and how to live life and how to get back on your feet. You will have that sympathy in many cases. You'll have the empathy in the other cases. And you'll be a constructive force to help that person who's suffering. It's everything you need in one spot, and it comes at the price of your own success. It's a win-win-win. Just be advised. It's going to suck.
Yeah.
Reference your 1014.
Yeah.
This is going to suck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I try to get everybody to push themselves, because there's a lot of learning on the other end of that. There's a lot of soul searching.
Yeah.
You'll come out on the other end knowing who you are.
Yeah.
A lot of us don't. You'll learn.
Well, you've definitely pushed me, and you've pushed a lot of people.
So.
And so I really do appreciate you coming out here today. I want you to let everybody know how they can connect with you in regards to what you got coming up, what you got going on.
Okay, super.
And your TikTok.
The easiest business end is the Gmail. So shadetreecardiology@gmail.com. If you're going to send any intense medical questions, I do ask people to send them there. I give no medical advice, none. I have to say that, but in email, it's easier for me to cite sources and give you a bibliography. And I use Chicago style because it's easier on my brain, and give you a detailed answer. TikTok, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to put in paragraphs. Also, if you send me a message on TikTok, please be patient. I don't check those all the time, and I don't always understand it's a legitimate request. I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's a lot of thirsty people on TikTok. I am not always open to opening those messages and dealing with that. You can also get up with me. I'm on the gram. Is that the cool way to say it?
That's
I'm
how
on
they're
the
saying.
gram.
That's how they're saying it nowadays.
I'm on the Insta Shizzle.
Yeah.
And I have a Facebook. It's all Shade Tree Cardiology. Feel free to reach out at any of those. And if you want me to come down and do lectures and stuff like that, I'll be honest, it's my favorite thing to do. Please reach out to me. My prices are excruciatingly reasonable, and they are different based on who you are. So if you're community college or a 911 service, they are the bare minimum, because I can't get the message down there if I'm demanding money for, you know what I mean, incredible salaries and things, which is ridiculous,
Yeah.
And I'm already doing well, so I don't have to gouge anybody. But my favorite thing to do is to come down and do that. So if you do want to get up with me for that, please do. I'll fit you in the calendar. Because I like that interaction, because the conversation like we're having, which is my favorite thing about podcasts, by the way, a long form, these happen after every lecture with people who they want advice, or they need to hear it, or you know what, maybe I need to hear what they have to say.
Oh, that's good.
And the more people I meet and the more interactions I have like that, it makes me it's very spiritually fulfilling for me. So if you want to get up with me for that, I have a lot of people say, I know you get a ton of these and you probably can't do it. I assure you I can. We'll figure it out.
Oh yeah.
We'll make plans.
Yeah.
We'll plan the calendar.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is through the Gmail. I don't give out my phone number.
Understandable.
Yeah, but that is for serious inquiries. Use the Gmail. Everything else, or if you just want to drop a line and say hi, or tell me that something helped you. Please don't hold those messages back from me. That's what keeps me going. TikTok gives you like a whole 2 pennies for 1 million views. You don't make a killing on TikTok. I 100% post this stuff because it's benefiting people. So please get up with me that way, because that's fueling the fire.
Yeah.
You keep my fire alive, and I do my best to stoke yours.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, man, if you ain't following him, you better follow him, because it's really good information. You new medics, encourage you to jump on that opportunity. TikTok's free. It's free information for you, and he is full of the information for all of you and everybody else too. Definitely encourage you to jump on. It has absolutely been a pleasure to be a part.
I'm pretty sure I enjoyed this as much as you did.
Yeah.
It was great to this is the first time I've sat down and done a long form, like in person.
Yeah.
And to kind of tell the story that so many people ask, and get to put it all out there. There's some really profound moments in this one that came out of nowhere.
That's awesome.
I dig it, man. I enjoyed this as much as you did.
Well, I appreciate it.
I
appreciate it. I want you to get home to your family.
Yep.
But again, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it.